So Arch Tempered Nergigante is not only the latest release in Monster Hunter World, as far as we know until Iceborne he is going to be the last major content drop. And he is very fun. He is an extremely challenging monster to fight, not only due to his high health pool, but also because his spikes now have double the health. They also become black faster, meaning you have to play particularly aggressively in order to make sure you keep them broken before they go black. However, his new moveset additions also punish overcommitment towards aggression, meaning that fighting him is a delicate balancing act of maximizing your damage while not overcommitting. A very fun, if challenging fight. But what are our overall first impressions of Arch Tempered Nergigante? Well, I'm JinJinx, one of the Monster Hunter math guys, and this is the Arch Tempered Nergigante first impressions. So, first off, to address the elephant in the room, no, I have not yet had the opportunity to get a clear on Arch Tempered Nergigante. When he dropped, I did stream him for about 2 hours or so, and since then I have been working on videos or otherwise been preoccupied, so I have literally not had a chance to fight him again. However, the community has figured out a lot about Arch Tempered Nergigante as well as different counter strats, and frankly I think my time is better spent making a video about that instead of fighting him more. And for those of you who don't know, I have extremely bad ADHD. If a task is particularly focus intensive, I cannot physically focus on it past 6 minutes. And Arch Tempered Nergigante has 26,000 HP. High doses of caffeine does help alleviate my symptoms to a degree, but since he dropped at 8 PM my time, I had no opportunity to drink caffeine. My insomnia is bad enough as it is. So yeah, every single run was very clean up until around 6 minutes or so when I started triple carting constantly. But this does also bring up the first point I want to address with Arch Tempered Nergigante. The fight takes a very long time relative to other monsters. Extremely clean runs are still turning out around 10 to 15 minutes right now. So if long-term focus is a problem for you like it is for me, you need to make sure that you are well prepared for the long haul before you load up this quest. This isn't Oda, you can't kill him in a minute 30. And the reason I bring up Oda is because they're both very similar in that they are both very high attack pressure monsters. This leads to them being much more about twitch reflex in terms of rolling and blocking attacks, as opposed to a monster like, say, Diablos, which is a bit slower and more methodical, so it's more about your timing and preparation to each attack. Which combined with his high health pool means that the fight will not only be long but very intense. In fact, if you've ever tried to solo Behemoth, it's a very similar fight in that sense. A long fight with high attack pressure that requires your focus to be intense the whole time. And if you ever caught my streams of me soloing Behemoth, I was not able to get my TA clear until I had heavily caffeinated right beforehand. These kinds of fights are the worst possible matchup for me because I'm physically incapable of focusing for that long, at least without the aid of a substantial amount of caffeine. Conversely though, this kind of fight is the perfect matchup for someone like Tuna. In fact, he got his first clear on his second try. Tuna is much more of a twitch and reaction gamer, which makes him a perfect matchup for Arch Tempered Nergigante. Not to mention, unlike me, he decided to actually use mantles and rock drops because he's a smart boy. I decided that it would be a great idea for me to run TA for every single run except for one against him. Who needs mantles when you can just get good? But as always happens with these new content drops, the community is on fire right now, sharing different secrets and little mechanics that we've noticed, as well as different counter strategies. So we will be making an easy peasy Arch Tempered Nergigante video, which will be covering all of the counter strats we have found, as well as the different methods that work consistently. But that kind of thing does take time. So before that comes out, we do want to talk about everything so far the community has learned about Arch Tempered Nergigante. So first off, let's just mention that PartBreaker does not do anything for breaking his spikes. It exclusively affects his horns and tail cut only. I confirmed this by counting the damage on the head spikes until break in 2 of my runs. One had PartBreaker, one did not. For my run without PartBreaker on Longsword, it took 642 to 707 damage. Now let's compare this to my Lance run with PartBreaker 3. In this run, the head spikes broke at 667 damage. Now keep in mind, this is an n=1 sample size, so take it with a grain of salt. This is only a singular test. If we want to get some really hard data on this, we're gonna have to load up a PC version and use some overlay mods. But as I talked about before, that's a bit of a questionable practice, so we're still not sure if we're going to actually do that. Also, this damage counting does show that the part break values we found in the quest files are not equal to the break values for the spikes. It seems that those values are for the flinch for the individual limbs, and the actual spike health is around 75% of that. Now let's talk about the rampaging elephant in the room, his new moves. He does have his 360 tail swipe that hurts a lot, but it's actually pretty easy to dodge just because it has so much wind up. On the other hand, the new move that we are sure everyone is so angry about is his back hop bomb move. There's really only one way to describe this move, and that's fucking terrifying. I'm sure many of you already have horror stories about this move. However, I am going to say something that is probably going to be very unpopular opinion. In my opinion, this move is both extremely fair and fairly easy to dodge. Okay, so before you murder me in the comments, allow me to explain myself. Despite how the move feels, it actually has almost a full second of wind up before it makes contact. That is actually quite a bit of time to react to the move. On top of that, it barely has a lingering hitbox, making it fairly easy to iframe. And in fact, the hitbox itself is pretty small, so even if you don't trust yourself to iframe it, if you roll to the right, you will dodge it almost every single time. This is because he actually places his fist for that move slightly to your left. Really, the only time the rolling to the right method has failed me is if he is behind me when he uses it, in which case you need to roll in whatever direction is Nergigante's left. Overall, I think this is a very well designed mechanic. However, let's talk about why despite this it has caused so much community frustration. There is one simple reason for this: it punishes overcommitment. Basically, if you are stuck in an animation when this attack happens, it will hit you. And it will hit you hard. And this is a thing you have to play around, especially because his AI starts to change and become more aggressive as the fight goes on, similar to Behemoth. And then he starts spamming this back hop bomb move. Almost every monster in the game has some sort of jab move, but it's generally a much lighter hit that you can only get through with flinch free. The only monster I can think of that has a harder jab like this is going to be Odogaron. His claw jabs go through flinch free and also cause bleeding. The only other monster like this in the game, as far as I can think of, is Behemoth, but he is meant to be a multiplayer monster. Yes, you can be a mad lad like me and solo him, but he is not meant to be fought that way. And both of these monsters do heavily punish animation commitment, much like Arch Tempered Nergigante, which I do not think is a bad thing necessarily, but it does make it so players who aren't used to that kind of playstyle have to adapt to it, which is why I have seen a harsh dichotomy in opinions on Arch Tempered Nergigante because of this back hop bomb move. The skillful Twitch reaction style hunters don't seem to have any problem clearing him, while those who are used to more methodical, slower gameplay are struggling. Anyway, let's go ahead and walk through the other things we've learned about Arch Tempered Nergigante. So as far as we can tell, his spikes do not actually change color faster. However, his spikes always start at the gray stage instead of the white stage, which means that realistically they do end up going black about twice as fast. And as we mentioned earlier, they do have twice the HP of normal Nergigante. This means that running Mindseye may actually be a very good idea. If you simply do not have the skill to keep the damage pressure up and constantly break the spikes over and over again, you may need Mindseye to make sure you don't bounce and then get decked by a back hop bomb. Speaking of skills, if you are particularly struggling, Health Boost 3 is definitely a good idea. It turns a lot of his 2-shot wombos into combos that instead leave you with 10 health. Also, you do not need guard up to block anything he does. I've been told by others that he has a pin attack that you need to use guard up against, but I haven't actually seen it yet. Every single move I have gone up against of his, I have not needed guard up for. And yes, that includes his Black Spike Dive Bomb. In fact, that thing barely tickles you. And keep in mind, I am running guard 1 in the background footage you see right now. Guard 1 is plenty enough if you are skilled at running Lance. He has very few attacks that require a higher guard level to not have high knockback on, and you can avoid this by using guard dash anyway. In case you did not know, the guard dash move on Lance has a higher guard level than your base guard. However, that being said, Arch Tempered Nergigante has quite a few multi-hits that will shred your health, so you may want to run guard 3 just to reduce chip damage. Also, Fortify might not be a bad idea because it's very likely you'll card against this guy. And finally, if you are not using a blocking weapon, there's no shame in running Evade window. The reality is he is a very high attack pressure monster. Running Evade window can help you keep up with that attack pressure without having to be as perfect in execution every time with your rolls. Arch Tempered Nergigante definitely seems to have a higher speed modifier than normal Nergigante, meaning that he does attack faster. And with this fight easily taking over 10 minutes, it can be very difficult to keep up the consistent iframing otherwise. Yes, I know, but JinJinx, what about my max deeps? Well, just to once again clarify, we provide the max DPS sets for one reason. People want it, and there's a lot of misinformation out there on what the highest damage sets actually are. If you look back to our previous videos, we actually do recommend defensive skills when it's appropriate. There are some matchups where it's simply too challenging or impossible to actually compensate for their mechanics without using defensive skills. A classic example of this is using Evade window on Bow against Arch Tempered Val. You literally cannot roll his roll without Evade window, unless you run Evasion mantle. But the simple reality is, if you're someone like me who struggles to maintain focus for that long a period of time, you may need Evade window to cover up your slight mistakes in terms of iframing. So yes, for those wondering, I will probably run some Evade window when I start streaming Arch Tempered Nergigante again. Okay, let's talk counter strats. We're going to talk specifically about solo strats so far because there haven't been that many multiplayer runs done so far. Although speaking of multiplayer, I am 100% certain you can cluster cheese in with 4 people and a skilled CC heavy bow gunner. However, outside of that, there's not much to discuss as of yet. So for solo strats, first off, don't be a donkey like me. Which is to say, do not run him TA the first few times you are fighting him. Get used to his moveset, learn how to fight him, and then maybe consider ditching all of the useful mantles and everything else. One of the ways I expressed my donkeyhood was that in Area 1, there are 2 juicy rock drops you can drop on him. And even in my one non-TA run I did on stream, I completely forgot the rocks existed. 26,000 HP is a lot. So yeah, drop rocks on him. Also, just a general thing for every single weapon in the game, do not commit to high animation attacks. As we already mentioned, his back hop bomb is an extremely punishing jab that punishes those animation commitments. This does mean that Longsword does struggle to land Helm Breakers unless he's down, and Charge Blade struggles to land SAEDs. Of course, you can still always just YOLO the hell out of it, but as the fight goes on and he spams his back hop bomb more and more, this is going to be more and more punished. You are much better off sticking to your low animation commitment attacks, so if he does do a back hop bomb, you can easily avoid it. I do actually think this is a very fair mechanic. These huge super moves that deal huge DPS are meant to be attacks you use when you have a big enough opening to use them. But so few monsters have small openings in this game, you pretty much just spam them. So yeah, frustrating because that's probably how you're used to playing these weapons, but I do think it's fair. Which leads into our next point, the strong weapon matchups against him. So again, I have only had about 2 hours to actually fight Arch Tempered Nergigante yet, so I haven't tried all of these. But the community has managed to so far identify a few weapons that are particularly strong. And when I say strong, I don't mean what gets you the fastest clear time, I mean what gets you the clears most easily. So these are going to be Sword and Shield, Lance, Insect Glaive, Dual Blades, and Gun Lance, specifically Wide Gun Lance. All of these can either dodge or block his attack pressure fairly easily. However, Longsword also can do this because of Foresight Slash, but isn't in this category. This is because the 5 weapons we mentioned also happen to have extremely low animation commitments. Because of this, you can constantly apply damage pressure to his spikes to break them while still making sure you're able to roll or block his back hop bomb attack. Out of all of these, SnS and Lance are probably the strongest options. With a guard 3 set, some nice poke precision, and not getting too greedy, the Lance can pretty much consistently break his spikes easily while not taking much of any damage itself. The hard part with Lance is making sure you're well positioned against Arch Tempered Nergigante. If you're not well positioned, it's hard to read his animations to time your blocks, as well as it's hard to decide which angle it's coming from. And you generally don't want a power guard because his attacks hit so hard, the increased chip damage really hurts. Now, Lance is actually one of the most mobile weapons in the game if you know how to effectively use guard dashes and hops. But you do need to know how to do this well if you want to consistently maintain good positioning against Arch Tempered Nerg. Sword and Shield is particularly strong because the back hop on SnS has more iframes than any move in the game except Foresight Slash. Combine that with the almost non-existent animation commitment of your slice and dice attacks, and that falling bash gives you access to wing damage as well as higher damage on the horns because they have a higher blunt hit zone value, which then also leads to KOs. Yeah, it's not surprising that Tuna as an SnS main and also a Twitch reflex gamer had a very easy time with Arch Tempered Nerg. Oh, and SNS also has a shield, and apparently with no guard, you can just block his Black Spike Dive Bomb. So yeah. Now, Dual Blades does have a Demon Dash that has more iframes than regular rolls, on top of having low animation commitments and extremely high DPS. The only problem with Dual Blades that puts it lower than the other two in my mind is because when you trip Nergigante, you have such short range that the range on Demon Dance is so short, the flailing animation of his legs pushes you out of range of it. So you're pretty much forced to Demon Dance his tail or his head, which is bad because if you can hit the legs during the trip, you can build up chain trips. As for IG, it's extremely strong against him, but you do have to be decent at iframing. IG just has a normal roll, so it doesn't get extra frames compared to the other weapons. I also have been told by Naraki, a guy I've known on Discord for a while, that aerial IG is actually a very easy clear against him. I haven't had a chance to test this yet, but Naraki is not a speedrunner. He's a hunter just like you and me, and if he finds this to be a very easy clear strategy, it probably has some merit. Apparently, the majority of his moves just simply fly under you when you're flying around. Definitely not the fastest way to clear Arch Tempered Nerg, but definitely a method that may get you consistent clears. And thank you again to Naraki for bringing this potential method to my attention. And finally, why Gun Lance isn't in the top 2 category in my mind is because its damage output simply isn't that high. Gun Lance has always been in the awkward position where shelling gives you hit zone value independent damage, so its actual motion values are very low. This means against good hit zone values like Nerg spikes, you're not really doing that much damage. However, it does have a shield as well as low animation commitment, at least when you're using wide Gun Lance. And if you stick a Mindseye deco in there, that means you can also use shelling on black spikes. Because the shelling is going to be hit zone value independent, this does mean that you're going to have a bigger window to break spikes more easily and get trips, which definitely has a lot of merits. Also, past Artillery 3 and Capacity Boost, you're not increasing your shelling damage anymore. And EFR increases for your pokes doesn't really give you that high of an increase in DPS. So you can definitely run a much higher quality of life and defensive build with wide Gun Lance and sacrifice very little damage. Health boost, evade window and extender, guard 5, fortify, divine blessing, just whatever you want. The final thing I want to mention in terms of strategies is similar to Behemoth, you probably want to cycle mantles against Arch Tempered Nerg just because it's such a long fight. So for example, run Tempura mantle as well as Evasion mantle for the first area. For the second area, run Vitality mantle and Rcoksteady or something. And then for the third area, once again, run Tempura mantle as well as Evasion mantle, repeat. Or, you know, be a mad lad like me and try to do TA and cry on stream. Okay guys, that's all I got for you. We will of course have a full easy peasy Arch Tempered Nerg guide out once we have more time to actually test strategies. But as always, thank you so much for watching the video. If you learned something useful, be sure to leave a like. And if you have any interesting nuggets of information related to Arch Tempered Nerg you'd like to share, be sure to leave a comment below. We love hearing about juicy nuggets of information. As always, thank you to Honey for making the tools we use to make sets with. No sets in the video, but we like to show our appreciation. And if you'd like to talk with some people about Arch Tempered Nergigante, or you'd like to find some people to hunt with, be sure to check out our Discord server, the Mathalos Nest. AT Nerg is definitely the hot topic in the moment. Be sure to check out our Twitter where we post updates about videos as well as just random stuff that interests us. And of course, be sure to check out Tuna on Twitch where he'll be streaming Arch Tempered Nerg, Arch Tempered KT, and just a whole bunch of different things. And of course, if you enjoy our content and would like to consider supporting us and protecting us from the YouTube algorithm, be sure to check out our Patreon. And an especially big thank you to Foray, Exponage, David Sternberg, XCLK07, Heike, Milky Powder, Yoshi Cho, John Cohen, Lithaboli, Robin, Bram Orsel, Chris Porth, Lightweight, McPersona, Skylar Yang, Checkleman, Lupin, Mongus, Zim, Billy Barthol, Lord Sidone, Rodolph Charlot, Reaper Time, Jamie, and every single one of you who supports us on Patreon. We literally could not do what we do without your guys' support. Otherwise, we'd be making clickbait videos about, I don't know, my cat or something. YouTube algorithm can be a bitch. Anyway, we have plenty more videos on the way for you guys, so be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell if you'd like to hear about those the moment they come out. Happy hunting, hunters. We'll see you guys on the next one. Bye!